everyone. My name is Andrew Potter, and I'm a project leader here in Saline County for Missouri 4-H. And today's topic that we're going to be covering is public speaking and some effective tips on how to be a good public speaker. Whether you're giving presentations to your 4-H club, maybe your church, or even later on at your job and profession, there's going to be a time in your life, more than likely, that you're going to need to present information in front of people, and these tips can help you on how to be an effective public speaker. It's been said that a majority of Americans, their number one or one of their greatest fears is giving public speaking, but hopefully today, through implementing some of the strategies that we're going to talk about, it won't be as difficult for you to get up in front of people and talk your mind and talk through a topic. So in 3 areas we're going to be covering today is your voice and projection during public speaking, movements in your body and what you do during your speaking, and third and finally is some visual aids that you can use while you are presenting your speech or your topic of choice. Starting off with first is we're going to be talking about your voice and projecting your voice during your speech. The first, and at least what I put it most importantly, is I know this is one of my biggest issues during public speaking, is pace. You don't want to go too fast because you need to be able to convey information to people that they can then in turn listen and internalize what that information is. If you're speaking way too quickly, there's not going to be a way for anybody to understand what you're saying, right? So you want to have a nice, easy pace, but at the same time, you don't want it to be going too slowly. I think we can all relate when we've heard maybe, we won't say which teachers, but we've heard teachers, or I know history lecturers try to get people in that slow, monotonous tone and pace of each and every word, almost like the Peanuts teacher of wah, 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 wah. So you don't want to be going too slowly either. You want to have a nice, easy pace that people want to listen to you because you're exciting and you're presenting information, but also that you're not going so quickly that they can't understand you. Secondly in this is your volume, and especially depending on where you are speaking, your volume is going to play an integral part on whether or not people can understand you. This room that we're in is rather large that if I'm speaking at this volume, most people in this room would be able to hear me. However, if I speak really softly, nobody's going to be able to understand me, maybe in the first row or two. So you want to be able to project your voice to be able to reach all the people in the back of the room. However, you don't want to have too much volume of that either. People don't really like being yelled at. So if your volume is too loud, and especially if you're in a smaller room when giving your presentation, I know giving presentation in classrooms or even rooms at church, some of those rooms can be pretty small, maybe even just one table and a few people. So you always want to know your surroundings and what type of volume you need to use while giving your speech, because that's also going to be an important part of when you are being able to be understood. This leads us finally to this point in the voice is all of this is to say that your speech should be conversational in tone. I know sometimes people get different speaking voices when they're up in public than when they talk, but you want to go at a pace and a volume that if you were just talking to your friend or your buddy, that's what this public speech is. You're talking to essentially all of the people in the room as if they're your friend. So when I talk to my friends about video games or about basketball, I'm excited about it. I don't speak too quickly, and I speak exactly the pace I want to go and the volume at which I want to go, and I want to invite them in. That's all done with your voice, and a really good way of doing that is by following these 2 and also experimenting with being able to have and define what your speaking voice is. I know practicing in the mirror and practicing in front of friends can really help you to better use your voice when doing public speaking. So our second point that we're going to talk about today is the body and what you do during a speech. I think moving around is good. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the most important part in moving your body or using your body, in my opinion, is eye contact. You want to be able to holding eye contact with people throughout the room, or even if it's a one-on-one speech, because that's what you would do in a conversation more than likely. If you're looking down or you're looking across to this picture or this television, I'm not trying to talk to and persuade this television, right? I'm trying to talk and persuade the people in the room who I'm giving my speech to. So it's great to make eye contact, because then people can also let you know what they're receiving in your speech. They'll let you know with their face. It's hard not to have any sort of reaction to a public speaker when they're talking at you, making eye contact, because you do that in a regular conversation. Your face changes, you smile when you like something, you may frown when you don't. So it's a really good way of trying to read the room of what they're feeling, what they're thinking, and so it's a great time to use eye contact because you become a more engaging speaker. Also with this, eye contact being important, you want to be able to use your hands and arms in a very natural way that you would do again speaking. When I'm talking to people, I naturally use my arms and hands. It's odd for me, especially, to just stand still like a plank while I'm giving a public speech, or even when I'm talking. So using your natural gestures, your natural ability to use your body and hands and arms while you're speaking will go a long way into making you a more relatable speaker, and as well as an engaging speaker. I think also you have to realize too, though, and realize about yourself, there may be arm movements or hand movements or things you do with your body that may distract or be unnatural. I know when I was in high school and doing debate and forensics, I used to wear my class ring to every debate tournament starting out with. And during my debate speeches or during my public address speeches, I would sit and I would play with my ring. I had so many people tell me on my ballots or their judging ballots that I could not focus on what you're saying, I only watched you play with your ring. So learning what tics or habits that you have with your body and hands and making natural hand movements, you want people to focus on you as a speaker and your content instead of focusing on what you're doing with your face and hands or doing outrageous things that wouldn't seem natural. And third and finally on this point is movement. I think it's very important to have directed and intentional movement during your speech. It's not really natural sometimes for you to just go back and forth and pace. It's the same conversation we had about hands and arms. If you're pacing, people are going to focus on you pacing and maybe ask why you're pacing instead of focusing on the speech. And when we think about pacing too, it's more of an aggressive stance or a nervous stance rather than a confident putting your feet in a certain place and standing there and presenting your speech. But you want to be able to move during that. I think a really good thing to do when you're giving a speech, especially if it has like an intro, 3 body points, and a conclusion, is to, between every single time you transition between the body points, is to move to a different part of the room or your surroundings to demonstrate those points. You'll notice that when I moved from the voice to the body, I moved from this spot to this spot, so you're still focusing on me while I'm giving this speech. However, you do want to realize how much space you have in the room. If you're on a large stage, like say you're giving a presentation to your entire school and you're on the stage for it, maybe moving 2 to 3 feet each time is not effective because you're only focusing on the middle of the room. You want to be able to know your surroundings to reach the maximum amount of people when you're moving towards different parts of your speech. So know how large it is and how much you have to move. And similarly, if you're in a smaller area, making huge, large movements doesn't make sense as well. So we always want to move between our main body points, and when we move, we plant and we give our speech. So with those things with the body, of eye contact, hands and arms, and movement, Practicing these will give you a really good way, it's a really good way to start learning who you are as a speaker with your movement and also with your voice. Finally, we're going to be talking about visual aids during a speech and what they are and what they can do. This visual aid, and also what I've just knocked over, hopefully not a visual aid of University of Missouri. It's also fun as a tidbit to, if you're in the middle of a speech and something goes wrong, one, maybe you're the only one who notices it. If you have a planned speech going on and you're going to say, oh shoot, I talked about point 2 before point 3, or I didn't notice or I didn't mention this item in my speech, only you know about it. So especially if it's content, just keep on going. But if it's something like this, like University of Missouri, my hand accidentally caught this, or as we've been learning with, doing virtual learning, maybe my dog starts barking in the back of the classroom or in the back of the video conference while I'm talking. Making light of it is fun, but also you don't have to acknowledge it at all because it's just going to continue and nothing's wrong with accidentally knocking over Missouri thing. I know I'm acknowledging it more. We're going to get back to the speech. So, when we talk about visual aids, these should be things and what we'll even talk about in uses. But the thing I want to convey is these should only highlight and accent the speech. They should not be the main focus of the speech, and they should not take place of the speech. That's why we have minimal usage of them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But the first are different types of visual aids. You could have maybe an actual item in your hand if you're talking about different apple production in Washington. You could have different types of apples, and you could compare and contrast them. So there are physical visual aids that you could use to accent your point that you're trying to talk about. This here is just a typical flipboard. It acts as, almost a whiteboard, but I don't have to erase it and write every single time. And then I know one that we are increasingly using in a digital age is Microsoft PowerPoint. So those, I know when I did speech in college and when I taught speech in college, I demanded that students learn how to use Microsoft PowerPoint and they use them in their speeches. So those are some different types of visual aids. You can experiment and find which visual aids work for you. But the things that I want to talk about too with what is most effective of them, and again, going back to the point of they should not take place of the speech, is you don't want to write out your entire speech on a visual aid, and you shouldn't be reading every word for word from a visual aid. And I'm talking specifically about, flipboards or Microsoft PowerPoint in this instance, that you'll see when I have this visual aid, I just have my main body points and the main topics I want to talk about as a reminder for myself and the audience what we're talking about, but I'm not relying on them so much as I'm reading word for word what they say. And that's a really great point. So when you use a visual aid like a flipboard or a PowerPoint, you want to use maybe 3 to 4 words a bullet point. Typically it's nice to have like 1 or 2, but you don't want to be writing paragraphs because then people are going to focus more on your visual aid than on you as the speaker and what you're saying. And again, it should only highlight and accent your speech, not replace it. So that's what we want to use it for, is it should only be used when necessary. I know in debate and forensics, when we were speaking, there were most times we didn't use visual aids at all. You had to give a speech with you alone, and that may be what it calls for. You may have to give a speech where it's just you and no visual aid. So as much as it's great to practice with them, the use is only as an addition, not a replacement of that speech. So you want to use them sparingly or when they're only necessary. So with these 3 items, your voice, your body, and visual aids, this is just a blueprint and a beginning for you to start learning how to be a more effective public speaker. It's going to take time, it's going to take practice for you to really get comfortable with public speaking, so don't worry if it doesn't happen right away. But if you can use these tips of how to use your voice, your body, and some supplemental materials during your speeches, I'm sure that with time and practice, you and anybody else can become a very effective public speaker. So I thank you for your time. I hope you all are well, and have a good day.